My name is Kelly Thorvalson. I'm the Senior Manager of Conservation at the South Carolina Aquarium and Program Leader for the AZA, that's Association of Zoos and Aquariums Sea Turtle SAFE Program. Now, SAFE, for those of you that aren't familiar, is an acronym for Saving Animals from Extinction. There are more than 50 SAFE programs within AZA working to protect some of the most endangered species of animals around the globe. With 20 AZA Zoo and Aquarium program partners, the Sea Turtle Safe program is helping to conserve, well, obviously, sea turtles. Um, with 7 species of sea turtles living in tropical and subtropical oceans around the world, protecting all species of sea turtles would be a little too much for the program to take on. So, although some of our work does support conservation of all species, a good bit of our efforts are focused on two of the most endangered populations, the Kemp's Ridley and Eastern Pacific leatherback. Um, as you just met Cassandra Davis from Aquarium of the Pacific. She is our communications lead for our communications committee in Sea Turtle Safe. And Cassandra's here to help ensure that we have a smooth experience today. And so you'll hear from her in a few minutes. But now I'm just going to introduce our guests today, our special guests. We are so excited at Sea Turtle Safe to be wrapping up year 3 of the Sea Turtle Safe webinar series and are excited to have 2 members of Team Beach with us today, Dr. Rachel Smith and Dr. Kelley Anderson, or Rachel and Kelly as they prefer. They worked hard for those that introduction though, those degrees. So Team Beach is a global behavior change initiative, excuse me, working with sea turtle conservation communities across the globe to create meaningful human behavior change relating to the preservation of sea turtles and their habitats. Rachel and Kelly work closely with members of SWAT, or State of the World Sea Turtles. You're probably all very familiar with SWAT and the Oceanic Society. Hopefully you're all very familiar with Oceanic Society as well. But they all work together on this Team Beach initiative. And then 2 years ago, these two took a big step and created an organization called Human Nature Group. And that organization's mission is to improve the well-being of both humans and nature by integrating social science into conservation practice. Now, Rachel received her PhD in interdisciplinary ecology from the University of Florida, employing a coupled human and wildlife systems approach to sea turtle interactions in Florida's trap fisheries, and her Master's of Science in Biology from the University of North Florida. Kelley received her PhD from Virginia Tech in forest resources and environmental conservation, where she studied program evaluation and adaptive management with informal environmental education organizations. And she received her Master's of Science from the University of Florida in wildlife ecology and conservation. These ladies have over 25 years of combined experience in both social science and wildlife conservation. And we are super pleased to have them here today. And it's their Rachel and Kelley were motivated to form Human Nature Group because of their diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise, which, when combined, offer them a unique opportunity to advise and collaborate with conservation organizations to measurably improve outcomes for wildlife and people. So, thank you both for being here today. We are excited to hear what you're going to tell us. I'm going to turn this over to Cassandra to provide additional webinar information.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much, Kelly, for the introductions. I just want to provide a quick reminder this webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the AZA Safe Sea Turtle YouTube channel and distributed to everyone who registered so you can share with your friends and colleagues. Please add your questions. We have enabled the Q&A feature during the presentation, and we'll get to as many of the questions as possible as time allows after the presentation. Participants can see all questions, and you're actually able to upvote a question if it's one you're particularly interested in being answered. This will help us determine order of asking and choose if there happen to be any more questions than we have time for. The chat itself has been disabled just to avoid confusion with the Q&A feature. However, I will be adding helpful links to the chat at the end of the presentation so that you can investigate, learn more, and discover the things we're talking about. Now, I welcome Rachel and Kelley to bring us more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I went ahead and shared my screen. Can I get a thumbs up? Make sure it's there. We're seeing PowerPoint. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are really excited to share with you the Team Beach Initiative, which really was a dream that was thought up right at the start of the pandemic, and we are now going on 6 years of this work. So if you love sea turtles, if you love social science, you're in the right place. Thanks for joining us today. As Cassandra mentioned, feel free to put those questions in the chat or in the Q&A as they arise. We're really excited to hear what you think about the Team Beach initiative. So this initiative, Team Beach Be a Changemaker, was originally born out of a collaboration between the Oceanic Society SWAT team and Disney Conservation. And as Kelley mentioned, Rachel and I have since started our own consulting group to tackle this kind of work full time called Human Nature Group. But today we are talking all about Team Beach, our journey, where we started, and where we are headed.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And I can't see who's here, but I'm just imagining a lot of really familiar faces. So I'm happy to see you all and look forward to hearing questions at the end. Um, as a very wise friend once told me, ocean conservation boils down to two things: what we put in it and what we take out of it. This is really just another way of saying that at its heart, conservation is a people problem. And people problems require people solutions to solve. So this is really the goal of conservation behavior change. How can we work with people to better empower them to protect the ocean, to protect sea turtles, and to protect this one planet that we all call home? So you can go to the next. So why sea turtles? Why do they represent such an opportunity for behavior change in the conservation space? I think the answer lies in the multitude of diverse ways in which we are connected to sea turtles. For many, probably all of us on this call, they are beloved. This love stemming from deep religious and cultural reverence, formative memories from ecotourism experiences or experiences with family, and even characters in the films that we grew up with. Sea turtles have also been catalysts for conservation behavior campaigns that have seen some of the most incredible diffusion of all. I'm sure we all remember the straw herd round the world that kicked off that entire campaign around eliminating plastic straws. And then, of course, many communities are also reliant on turtles, either for livelihoods, for subsistence, or for other income generating activities. There are so many opportunities for connection and therefore for sea turtles to inspire behavior change for their conservation and actually for the environment more broadly. Sea turtles also have a massive network, as we all know, of researchers, educators, and practitioners dedicated to their conservation and their population persistence. And like our turtles, we occur in nearly every country, on nearly every continent, associated with nearly every ocean. Also, like our turtles, we are connected. 6 of the 7 sea turtle species undergo these transcontinental migrations, necessitating collaboration between the people studying how to protect them from the myriad threats that they face along the way. We are collaborative in a sense because the turtles demand this of us. Despite the immense opportunity for behavior change research and behavior-centered program design to diffuse across the sea turtle world, this is still an area of growth for us. If you take a look at some of the quotes here, you see that top one: social science contributions currently comprise less than 5% of the marine science literature broadly. We also want to highlight, if you can look on the right side of that slide, and I'll walk you through this graph. This is from Robinson et al. 2023. They studied a lot of, they looked at actually International Sea Turtle Symposium program abstracts over the past several decades and looked at all of the different methodologies that were being used and presented at that annual international gathering. And I think we saw that the use of questionnaires and surveys comprised only about 5% of the methodology that was being used across the field. And of course, that was the one social science methodology that was represented here. And they concluded that they believed that the use of social studies remains underutilized in sea turtle science. And then if I could direct you to the bottom left-hand quote, this is from a review of conservation priorities and kind of where we need to go from here in the sea turtle world. And they say, social science research for sea turtle conservation, defined as research that strives to enhance conservation by studying, for example, how humans interact with and impact on biodiversity, and specifically how individuals or communities can be motivated or incentivized to reduce negative impacts or contribute directly to conservation, is evident, but we need more of it. So this is actually the call for more behavior-centered design and more behavior change focused research in the sea turtle world. We saw an opportunity for more meaningfully integrating behavior change into sea turtle conservation at this disciplinary level. Of course, this does not mean that there hasn't been behavior change already occurring all over the world, and we recognize all of the incredible contributions in our field so far. The key opportunity for us seemed to be promoting behavior change as a central tenet to how we approach sea turtle conservation and creating that community of practice to do so. So we really position ourselves as a sharing platform to more broadly integrate and build this knowledge. Everything from aligning our terminology to using theory-guided approaches to collaborating on funding opportunities.
So that's really how Team Beach was created, right? We were just a group of social scientists and sea turtle practitioners wanting to further integrate these two fields together. And the founders of Team Beach are really a collaborative of natural scientists and conservation practitioners. And this is a model that we really hope to inspire throughout the whole community. So from that, we really sat down and thought about like any good new initiative, right? What are our goals? What's our mission? What's our vision? So we spent a lot of time over Zoom thinking through those questions. And we really wanted to help our vision was to help foster a world where sea turtle organizations really engaged audiences in conservation action that positively impacted the health of sea turtles, both sea turtles and the ocean, right? Because they're so interconnected. And as Rachel was saying, to do this, we really envision this network of sea turtle practitioners and social scientists all working together, sharing resources, convening in webinars and meetings in person to really build capacity to do and use social science and promote action for sea turtles. So through kind of this creation of this network, we were really hoping to see an increase in the use of behavior-centered design in designing programs for people aimed at changing human behavior to increase that measurable conservation action. So there is also an evaluation component here. We wanted to build skills in evaluation to continue to kind of learn how to do this work better and better and further integrate social science into sea turtle conservation.
So again, like any good social science initiative, we decided that the first step in determining the pathway forward should be to ask our community where they're at, what they need, and engage their interest in behavior change resources. So the first thing we did, and again, this was back during the pandemic in 2020, we put out a baseline survey in both English and Spanish. It was available, and heard from 88 researchers, educators, and practitioners from 38 different countries around the world. So a nice representation compared to the global distribution of sea turtle species. As you can actually see in these two maps on the right, the top photo is where the sea turtles are. That's all data managed by SWAT. And the lower map is where our survey responses came from. One of the questions we asked respondents was what the primary threats to turtles were where they worked and where they conducted programming. The four most commonly cited threats we heard about were plastic pollution, fisheries impacts, climate change, and direct take or direct harvest. The common thread here again is that each of these issues is a people problem. One of the most important findings, though fairly unsurprising, is that 95% of sea turtle programs included one or more conservation calls to action in their programming. This shows us that behavior change is a highly desired outcome of our efforts to interact with the public and other target audiences. But how do organizations know that they are achieving behavior change? We asked survey respondents how they are evaluating the impact of their programming. Though several programs are using methods that could assess behavior change, such as focus groups or surveys, even more are either not conducting evaluation at all or using metrics that do not measure behavior change, such as program attendance and social media metrics. Of those who are using surveys as an evaluation tool, so just taking those responses, most were unaware or did not provide the outcomes that they were attempting to measure with their surveys. Almost no programs were measuring behavioral intention or the likelihood that those that they were interacting with would then go and perform the conservation action they were promoting. And further than that, none of them were using surveys to assess sustained behavior change. We plan to repeat the survey within the next year now that we've surpassed this 5-year mark of the Team Beach Initiative to assess changes in awareness of behavior change and evaluation methods in sea turtle conservation. Anecdotally, we've seen surging interest in this topic, not just from Team Beach efforts, but much more broadly. And it will be interesting to capture how our capacity as a global community has changed within the last 5 years since we initially conducted this survey. The survey results provided an important baseline, I think, for the state of procedural knowledge or sort of how-to knowledge of behavior change in the global sea turtle community. And it also affirmed opportunities for more connection, more capacity building, and interdisciplinary collaboration. This informed our thinking for the role that Team Beach could ultimately serve. An early logic model we put together is shown here, highlighting our goal to begin as a platform for collaboration and resource sharing among practitioners in the sea turtle community. As you all know, sea turtle people wear many hats, and so many of us are responsible not just for science and population monitoring, but also outreach, education, communication, the list goes on. Through our capacity building efforts and facilitated resource sharing, Team Beach aimed to alleviate some of that burden by connecting folks on the ground with the resources that they need to improve sea turtle conservation outcomes of their programs through behavior change. Our vision is mobilize communities taking action for sea turtles all over the world through a dedicated community of practice.
All right, so this is where a capacity building model really started to take shape. So during the pandemic, we grew the network by hosting a webinar series where we invited behavior change experts to really share their perspectives with the sea turtle community. And we also heard from sea turtle researchers and practitioners who were sharing case studies of this work in action. So while we were all virtual, this is how we convened everyone through webinars just like this to share stories and resources. But during this time, behind the scenes, we were also brainstorming ideas for what we could offer once we were back in person again. We really valued and thought it was really important to have that in-person connection to build capacity. So in 2023, after a long hiatus, the International Sea Turtle Symposium finally returned and was held in Cartagena, Colombia. And this was where we hosted our first behavior change workshop, which has really become central to what Team Beach is. So we thought the symposium was really a great opportunity to share our knowledge about social science and behavior change with practitioners from across the globe. And our hopes and dreams for this workshop really were that we wanted it to be applied. We didn't want it to feel like a one-way lecture or a class where we're just kind of imparting knowledge on those who are in attendance. So what we did is leading up to the symposium, we solicited case studies on the Team Beach listserv and the Sea Turtle listservs from organizations who really believed that the challenges they were facing could be improved somehow through a targeted behavior change strategy. And we honestly didn't really know if this was going to be successful. We just kind of put this call out for case studies. Like we were wondering, is anyone going to submit anything? Do people know who we are? Is this going to get traction? Well, we received about 8 really awesome submissions in the first year, and we decided to choose 5 of those to actually highlight at the workshop, which we're going to share more about shortly. But these workshops basically the case studies formed the foundation of the workshop, where we first gave an introductory presentation on designing and implementing behavior change strategies. We included some grounding in several behavior change theories and their potential applications. And then we kind of went into deeper explanations of various constructs within those theories, like social norms, value orientations, attitudes, beliefs, self-efficacy, right? These are the things that really help shape human behavior. So we did a deep dive on those concepts. And then we connected those concepts to some practical examples and case studies that have already been completed of maybe successful or even unsuccessful behavior change strategies that have been used in the field of wildlife conservation. So we started with theory, we started with content, we connected it to some relevant examples, and then we introduced a stepwise model for thinking through and developing behavior change strategies. Then we gave an overview of each of the featured case studies and then began to facilitate some breakout groups where each breakout group was assigned one of those case studies, and we walked through this stepwise model. So the goal of this was really to work through designing an actual behavior change strategy using a simple worksheet that we created that walked through that stepwise model. And we found that this was like the best part of the workshop. This is what we really wanted to see. It was this big brainstorming session, sharing ideas and experiences from all across the globe to hopefully potentially come up with real world ideas for tackling these really tough challenges. So basically, each group then reported out what they came up with for their case studies, and there was a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. And after the workshop, we took all of those amazing ideas that were recorded on paper and kind of fleshed them out over the next couple months. And then we provided back to those original case study submitters really fully formed ideas that could be hopefully put into practice. So all of these action plans and these resources that we introduced during the workshop, they are all on our Team Beach website, which we'll drop in the chat. But these were put up there for easy access to all those who attended, all the case study submitters, anyone who was interested in kind of seeing and understanding this process. We wanted to make all these resources widely available. So that is kind of the basic structure of these workshops, right? We set them up with some content, then we dive into these case studies to actually implement and think through how you would create a behavior change strategy. So now we're going to talk through each one of these workshops and kind of how the thinking has changed over time. So in 2023, Columbia, our inaugural workshop, we again really had no idea how this was going to go, but we went all in, and it turned out to be really overwhelmingly positive. This first workshop was a half-day workshop, so it was about 4 hours, and we had over 80 participants, and we actually don't even know how many showed up because a lot more showed up than were registered. But I think in this process, we learned a lot about how to run a workshop like this, and that our main learning was we needed more time. Right, a half day wasn't necessarily cutting it. We had such an engaged participants. There was so much more we could cover if we had a bit more time. And so here's just one of the many testimonials we received, which came from a conservation practitioner, really sharing kind of their newfound preparedness to apply behavior change thinking and behavior change strategies into their projects. And she really mentioned loving the practical approach, right? This isn't just theory, but it's actually how to apply this thinking in a real world scenario. And that was our number one goal for these workshops, that was really applied. So we felt pretty good about this model and our desire to continue hosting this workshop year after year. Here are the case studies, the 5 case studies that we worked through during this initial workshop. Our goal was really to select a broad diversity, both in terms of geography and also a representation of the different threats that sea turtles face. So here you'll see we highlighted a project from World Wildlife Fund France, which aimed at reducing olive ridley bycatch and increasing adherence to a no-take zone in French Guiana. We highlighted a project from Stella Marie focusing on mitigating artificial light pollution from short-term rentals like Airbnbs and Verbos on Florida's coast. We covered a project from the Marine Resource Foundation, which was really wanting to increase the adoption of turtle excluder devices, or TEDs, in Sabah, Malaysia. We highlighted a project from the Atoll Marine Conservation Center, which was working to discourage the taking of sea turtle hatchlings as pets in the Maldives, where here it was really a long-standing tradition to take hatchlings and raise them in their homes, often in plastic water bottles. We also highlighted a project from the Wildlife and Human Resources Organization, which was trying to curb the illegal harvest of nesting leatherbacks in the Volta region of Ghana. So you can see a ton of diversity here, from direct take to bycatch to development, and so many good ideas were shared among this group. Again, if you want to take a look at the final action plans and dig into any one of these case studies that were developed, you can check them out on our Team Beach website. Most of the action plans that we've furnished so far really focus on relationship building with the target audience. So, for example, in the Maldives, we suggested attending community events and school events to really learn about the prevalence of keeping turtle as pets and the real motivations behind it, right? Could a replacement animal or species be suggested? Could there be a symbolic adoption? Does the preservation of turtle species really speak to community pride or local tradition? Like, who do community members trust? Who might be a good spokesperson for this message? So, what we found is that audience research and relationship building really is key to any successful behavior change strategy. So, we often first kind of start with this series of questions that they might need to collect information or data on before tailoring any specific strategy to that audience. The following year, we held the symposium, or the symposium was held in Pattaya, Thailand, and we had 42 participants representing 14 countries. So this is our second year. And this time around, we were lucky enough to receive support from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the AZA Safe Sea Turtle Program. And with this support, we were able to do so much more. We extended the workshop from a half day to a full day. We expanded our content to include the evaluation of behavior change strategies. And we were able to sponsor the travel for 13 practitioners from 11 Southeast Asian countries to actually come and participate in the workshop and the broader symposium as well. Since ISTS is hosted all over the world, we really thought it would be impactful for each workshop each year to actually focus on the region in which it is being held. So that was kind of a change that we made from the prior year. And this time for this symposium, we solicited case studies just from Southeast Asia, and I'm going to pass it to Rachel to chat about what those looked like.
Yes, thank you, Kelley. So as Kelley mentioned, due to the meeting location being in Thailand, we elected that year and continued with that tradition to sort of narrow the scope of our case studies to where we were offering the workshops. So in this case, Southeast Asian submissions. And we were really happy to again receive several amazing case study submissions to us, and we elected to go with these four. So that first one is from Kurma, and it was focused on mitigating the impacts of increased both light and noise pollution from an influx in tourism on the San Juan Islands in Philippines. We looked at a project from Fauna and Flora Myanmar addressing the opportunistic killing of sea turtles caught as bycatch in Myanmar. From the Anambas Foundation, this project was aiming to reduce the direct take of sea turtles in the Anambas Islands in Indonesia. And then from Lestari, exploring ways to reduce trafficking and trade of turtles in Sumatra, Indonesia. To give you a little bit of a deeper dive into one of these case studies, I'll just go over that first one. And again, if you want to see, Kelley mentioned this too, I think we've maybe mentioned this a few times, but we'll link you to sort of the deep dive case study action plans for all of these if you're interested in exploring further. But for Kerma's case study, we utilized a behavior change framework that we really like called the COMB Behavior Change Wheel. And COMB stands for capability, opportunity, motivation. So those being the three major factors that, when combined, help to influence behavior change. So that really guided the development of a preliminary behavior change strategy for us there. Considering the motivations and desires of tourists visiting the beaches of San Juan for recreation, we ended up settling on a preliminary key message around turtle-friendly time is a good time. And this framing really appealed to tourists whose primary goal we learned is to have fun. That is their primary goal, not much else. And also demonstrate that having fun and conserving sea turtles need not be in conflict with each other. We then thought about the structural change that must occur to offer these new turtle-friendly ways for tourists to recreate and relax and even party. So by the end of the workshop, the group was scheming about how to develop and market turtle-friendly discos at coastal hotels on San Juan, where tourists would party under the glow of sea turtle friendly lighting in a silent environment through the use of headphones. So I think we're really onto something interesting there. But I want to come back to something that Kelley mentioned, which is all of these action plans that we create are preliminary in nature because all of them require usually these first initial steps, which involve going out into the communities and learning a lot more about the various audiences that might exist and how you might need to segment different types of communication strategies and approaches in a behavior change strategy. So we provide a lot of the kind of the framework, the structure, the ideas, and walk through an entire case study, but ultimately, the guidance that we provide is to again start in those very beginning stages of the behavior change kind of stepwise plan. And we will go through our whole stepwise model with you shortly. All right, we can go to the next one. Then it was suddenly 2025. So earlier this year, we were in Ghana for the International Sea Turtle Symposium in Accra. And this year for the workshop, we again did a full day workshop, and the case study submissions focused this time on West African nations. We ultimately had 40 different participants from 20 different countries around the world. And this one was a learning experience for us. Though it was not planned, we ended up conducting the workshop in two languages, English and French, which I think was incredibly valuable and only possible because one participant stepped up to the plate and translated everything I said for the entire workshop. And so that was really, really valuable. We also welcomed Dr. Kate Mansfield to help us work through some exercises on difficult conversations that can really help with that initial audience research and community work at the beginning of every single behavior change strategy. So that was really valuable as well. Again, we were so grateful to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Marine Turtle Conservation Fund, and also the Oceanic Society, which supported the travel and participation of 14 West African practitioners to get to Ghana and be able to participate in our workshop and the broader symposium. And again, also super grateful to the AZA Sea Turtle Safe program for their funding for workshop development and implementation. We could not have done it without any of that support. So thank you. And we'll highlight a couple of the case studies we shared here. So this year we decided instead of selecting 6 different case studies that we would focus in on 3 and have two breakout groups focused on each case study to see if we could develop any comparative insights and if different groups came to different conclusions as they were working together. So this year we had from Nature Tropicale, a program about reducing impacts from coastal tourism, and again, specifically artificial lighting on nesting turtles in Benin. From the African Marine Mammal Conservation Organization, they were interested in reducing opportunistic take of sea turtles caught as bycatch in southwest Cameroon. And from Ghana Instinct, mitigating direct take of nesting sea turtles and eggs in Ghana's western region. So the breakout groups yielded important insights about these issues, and I'll share one more example with you from the AMCO example in southwest Cameroon. Different generations were found to think and feel very differently towards sea turtles within even the same coastal community. Some important insights were shared during the workshop, which included that some younger fishers support conservation while others are more money oriented. Other fishers experience fear and shame from catching turtles and actually hide these activities from the community chief. So there's a lot of different forces at play here. Learning information like this and more of it through audience research will help to determine who should be targeted for which behavior change interventions and how that work should be approached. We also learned about many diverse drivers of this sort of undesirable behavior, the opportunistic killing of turtles. Turtles are, of course, a food source, an opportunistic food source where food sources are limited, but also fishers are incurring net damage from incidentally catching turtles, and the money that they can earn from selling the turtle offsets these costs. Some fishers also feel anger towards the turtles for this net damage, and there's actually some retaliatory killing for that reason. Building out the barriers of moving to a new behavior will help to create an environment where there's, again, those three things from the theory: capability, opportunity, and motivation for change. For this group, we centered on methods for conducting audience research to improve the understanding of these different audience segments, from which a more detailed behavior change strategy will emerge.
All right, so you might be wondering, what about 2026? Well, next year's symposium is quickly approaching and it is going to be held in Hawaii. AZA Safe Sea Turtle is able to partially fund us this year, and we are forever grateful for their support. But unfortunately, and maybe unsurprisingly, we did lose federal funding. So we are still looking for the remaining funding to host this workshop. We actually already have quite a few people signed up to attend, and we are really, really hoping to pull it off. But if this does come to fruition, we will be focusing on kind of the Pacific Islands region. And the Hawaii context honestly makes this workshop especially timely and relevant. Turtles are really woven into the island's cultural identity, their traditions, and it's one of the only places in the whole world where foraging, nesting, and basking sea turtles really coexist alongside people, right? This is really a place where sea turtle conservation and human behavior intersect daily. So stay tuned. I really, really hope we are able to keep this workshop going annually, with the idea being kind of a new regional focus each year. Okay, so we've been talking about this kind of model for behavior change that we're walking through with each of these case studies. We wanted to just quickly highlight what this stepwise process looked like. Again, you can find all these workshop materials and the case study action plans on the website, which will have a lot more information than we can cover here today. But in this behavior change kind of stepwise model, we first start by identifying the what. Right? What is the threat or challenge you're trying to tackle? What are all the different behaviors that might contribute to or mitigate that threat? This is really the brainstorming phase. Sometimes the most obvious behavior isn't necessarily the one that's going to work best for your particular context and audience. So kind of keeping an open mind here is critical. The more ideas, the better. And speaking of audience, right, who's your target audience? What do you know about them? What assumptions might you be making? These first few steps are really all about setting the foundation, understanding your audience and your context to be able to tailor your strategy. There's really no one-size-fits-all plan. There's no one pager on how to do social science or behavior change work. It's all dependent on your context and your audience. So it's really important also at this stage to think about who's on your team. And we propose usually in this part of the workshop what's known as a PESTLE analysis, to really think of all the stakeholders who might be involved or who might be on your team. So that's from the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental realms. This is really building a team around you who's invested in this work, who can help kind of craft and implement this behavior change strategy. So once you've identified your audience and your target behaviors, and this often is not a linear process, right? It's kind of iterative, back and forth between the two to find the right fit. But then you've got to do some deeper audience research, right? What do you know about their motivations for their current behavior? What are the barriers they're facing to adopt the desired behavior? A lot of behavior change work is simply figuring out ways to make the desired behavior easier and more appealing than the current behavior. And in order to do this, you really need to know a lot about your audience and ideally have actually formed a relationship with them throughout this process. So once you've done kind of this foundational what, who, why work, it's time to really think through the actual behavior change strategy. And I'm going to pass it to Rachel to talk about that piece.
Yes, and so this is where we really get into the meat of behavior change strategies. So at this point, we typically will ask folks to identify a potential theory or framework to help guide the strategy. This does not mean you have to stick word for word to this theory. It's just meant to use as a kind of a structure or a guide to help think through all of the different components that might be useful and you might need to put in place to achieve success and behavior change. At this point, it's really important to think a lot about the key message and the framing of that message. So we spend a lot of time in the workshop going over sort of common concepts and ways that of developing effective messaging, and then some of the things that we think are effective and may not be so. An ex fun example that we like to give, most people might be familiar with this. If anybody remembers the old ASPCA commercials with Sarah McLachlan, where they play the really sad music and they show the really sad dogs, and then they ask you to donate, you may remember thinking, at least for me, this environment is not making me feel like I want to donate to this organization. This environment is making me want to crawl into a hole and shut down. So that's an example of one type of framing that we go over is guilt framing and how that can actually have sort of unintended effects in messaging. And there's a lot more where that came from. So we spend a long time thinking about the message and based on your audience, what the right framing approaches might be so that it actually resonates and penetrates in the way that you want it to. Just as important as the content of the key message is how it's delivered. So we spend a lot of time talking about the mode of delivery. What is the best way to reach the audience that you're intending to reach, and who is the best person to deliver that message? Oftentimes, it's not you, it's not your organization. Oftentimes, it's somebody else in the community or a celebrity that's highly looked up to. There's a lot of different ways that that could manifest, and so we spend time talking about that. And lastly, and this is something we added recently that we feel deserves a special call out is what structures must be in place to facilitate change. So it's just not just about communication and conveying a message, but it's also about creating an environment in which change can take place. So oftentimes this is where a lot of the funding is required to develop systems and structures that are going to be able to facilitate change. A good example here is if bycatch is a problem, opportunistic killing of turtles from bycatch, and a net repair program might be a solution. Well, there's a lot of different structures and potentially incentives and all sorts of things that have to be put into place for a program like that to be successful. And that's going to be highly dependent on the community in which you're working. So we spend a lot of time talking about those structures. And then all of these four components come together to develop a preliminary action plan. And we emphasize preliminary. There's only so much we can accomplish in the span of one full day workshop. The idea here is more so to get familiar with these concepts and how they all work together rather than coming up with a finalized tried and true plan. So we do furnish these action plans back with the note that these are preliminary and they might change and modify a lot as some of this on the ground audience research and community work takes place. So we did want to give a spotlight here to say that one of our ultimate goals of Team Beach is to advance a lot of this work and implement behavior change strategies on the ground in the long term. So I wanted to give an example of a case study in which that's actively occurring. So this is a case study that we received from the very first year we did the workshop, so 2023 in Cartagena. This was the project submitted by the Wildlife and Human Resources Organization in Ghana and focused on the illegal harvest and trade of turtles in the Volta region of Ghana. So we featured this case study in 2023 and provided the action plan back in October of that year. I was so happy to hear from this group that they immediately went out and conducted several of the community interviews that we had suggested in 7 different coastal communities around the Volta region of Ghana to better understand the drivers of the illegal harvest that was occurring and the barriers to abstaining from it, rather. Um, Notable similarities and differences among the communities have served as a critical foundation for us to begin applying for funding to further explore and implement targeted behavior change strategies on the ground. So we are now actively involved with this group and collaborating on grant proposals to advance the work. So what's next for us? We are excited to hopefully continue our annual capacity building workshops at the International Sea Turtle Symposium. We are exploring opportunities to advance implementation of some of these strategies, like I just mentioned, through grant-funded opportunities. Further, we continue to explore new ways to facilitate knowledge sharing, such as contributing the first behavior change chapter to be included in the updated version of the IUCN Marine Turtle Specialist Group's Research and Techniques Manual, contributing articles to the annual SWOT report, and offering capacity building workshops for similar societies, such as the Turtle Survival Alliance. In the future, there are many things we'd like to do contingent on funding. We all do and keep Team Beach going on top of our full-time jobs, every single person that's involved in this initiative. So we are highly contingent on funding, but we are keen to design an online course specific to designing behavior change strategies in sea turtle conservation that would be freely accessible to everybody who wanted to access it. And we also want to develop strategies to reshape thinking around conservation funding models that further integrate the social sciences into the development of conservation projects and interventions. One of the major barriers for natural scientists and partnering with social scientists is funding, and we recognize this as a critical opportunity to improve the integration of these disciplines.
All right. Well, we hope you have enjoyed the journey of Team Beach. We have so enjoyed being on the journey and sharing it with you. And we really want to say we are grateful to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and AZA Safe Sea Turtle for not only believing in this mission, but really for funding a lot of this work. Like we could not have done these amazing workshops where we were bringing practitioners from those regions to our workshop and to the symposium without this funding. And honestly, as Rachel mentioned, as our dream grows, so do the funds needed to support it. We're always looking for funding opportunities to help us keep kind of spreading this work around the globe. And also a huge thank you to Kelley and AZA Safe Sea Turtle for inviting us here today to talk about this work that we're so passionate about. And it's really great to see so many in attendance that hopefully really recognize the importance of social science in conserving the species that we care most about. So with that, thank you for listening. Reach out to us if you want to chat more about this. Join the Team Beach listserv to stay up to date. Check out the website with all of the resources we talked about today. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rachel and Kelley, and thank you for so many inspiring examples. We do already have a couple of questions that have been sent in, and before asking you all those questions, I just want to remind everybody you can ask your questions by clicking on the Q&A button on your Zoom screen and type in your question. You can also upvote questions. And we're going to start with one that is a really wonderful sign of recovery and one that is particularly near and dear to my heart. As some attendees know, I work with green sea turtles directly in the area. And we have a question asking about their recent relisting. So Brad asks, green sea turtles were recently relisted by IUCN from endangered to least concern after 40 years of dedicated global conservation efforts. So how is this fantastic news being integrated into Team Beach messaging? Are there any recommendations from Team Beach on this?
Kelley, you or me?
Yeah, you go ahead and take it as our resident turtle expert. I'll tag on.
Okay. This is an excellent question, and I've been thinking a lot, not just in terms of Team Beach, but just in terms of messaging in general, about the recent downlisting and kind of what that means about how we communicate with the public and with audiences about sea turtle conservation. So many of our messages have hinged on the fact that turtles are endangered and need us, and it's urgent, and this is why we must do, all of those things. Um, I really do think there's something to be said for the fact that sea turtles appear to be conservation dependent, even when they are recovering or have recovered. And so I think there's still absolutely a need to stay very close to that issue. But also I think there's messaging that exists outside of the fact that turtles are endangered or declining. And there may be some times where just messages about the intrinsic value of turtles or sort of the right for any species to live on this planet harmoniously makes sense. There's all I have to say on this is that, and I think we said this several times during the webinar so far, is that this is highly contingent on the audience that you're speaking to. So I love the question. I feel like it would be helpful to think about this in different scenarios. Are you talking to developers that you don't want to build a new high rise on a nesting beach, and your messaging might be very different for that audience than it might be for a group of families that are on an ecotourism program and still really invested and already sort of pre-interested in seeing sea turtles and being excited for the experience. So I think it's an important thing for all of us to continue thinking about and knowing that this field we work in is not static. It's gonna keep changing, and we're gonna have to keep evolving and modifying our message to accommodate that. I'd be curious if Kelly had anything to add.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of, when we were talking about framing, that guilt framing, that doom and gloom framing that conservation has sometimes fallen back on can really backfire. And one of the consistent things on in the framing literature is that hope and giving real examples of when an action made a difference. That works. That sparks action. So the fact that we have a species that we saw rebounded due to conservation action is something we should absolutely be messaging about because it makes people feel like their actions matter, which is really, really important, especially when we're thinking about these long-term changes over time. These examples are important. So good question.
If I could chime in very quickly on that, I've been with the South Carolina Aquarium for many years, and I remember early in my career there, I was plagued by the amount of plastic pollution and the issues with fisheries just taking so much from the ocean. And I remember pitching that we should have an exhibit that was just full of trash and had like two fish swimming around. And I was like, we have to show people what's happening. I was devastated. That was the first time I learned that, that is not going to work. That's not what people will be motivated by to reduce plastic pollution or talk about, or ask for sustainable seafood or whatever. Yeah. And so it's I've learned a lot more about that along the way, but it's really great to hear you both talk about that and how we have to give these positive messages.
Yep. Inspire hope.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love that. And thank you all for being here to inspire hope. And I'm just going to pass along some of the thanks that have been typed into the Q&A as well. It's just people saying thank you, great information, loving the dark and silent I cannot say that, beach disco, and just the fun ideas that can be a different approach to something that can be hard and sometimes heavy work. And we've got a few more other questions. So one is asking, can you share a little bit more about evaluation methods for behavior change, especially for organizations that might be working with tourists?
Ooh, I would happy to talk about evaluation. It is my very favorite thing. Taurus, that's an interesting group, and it's honestly one of, I would say, the a little bit more easy to get evaluation data from than, say, like community members in Ghana. So for tourist visiting, I think if you're doing any kind of like messaging program or even like a turtle walk. A lot of times, if you could do like informal conversations or informal interviews, but if you have a large group, really short surveys that are measuring the exact outcomes you're wanting to get from a program. So this starts at the planning phase, really thinking through like how do you want your audience to walk away differently? What are those two or three key things that you want to inspire or change in your audience? And then asking your audience that at the end of your program. That can be in survey form, in interview form, in focus group form. Really just communicating with your audiences and recording that information over time is invaluable to not only be able to see if you're reaching your intended outcomes, but also get some feedback on how you might change and adapt and improve your program moving forward as audiences and contexts change. So that information exchange between your visitors, your audience, your whoever you're interacting with, and your organization is super key.
I would just add on to that. Kelley mentioned outcomes, and that ends up being one of the most critical things that we talk about with organizations, and a lot of the work we're doing with Human Nature Group is the importance of before any program is planned or designed or before any evaluation tool is created, the outcomes have to be determined, and that's a step that we often see as missing. And an evaluation tool can actually help you to ask the right questions in your program design too. So it's not always like the evaluation happens at the back end. It actually really occurs throughout the entire planning process. And if you get to the end and you want your outcome to be behavior change, you want your outcome to be that people on the beach are throwing their trash away in the new trash bins that are on the beach. Are you providing them the procedural or how-to knowledge of how to do that in your programming? Oftentimes you're not. And so it can help to illuminate where some of those gaps are. So really all of the different planning phases work in concert to make sure that that happens.
These are amazing questions and amazing answers. We do have a few more questions. If Team Beach, if you are able to stay on just a little bit longer, and in consideration of those who might have a hard stop for for the end of the hour, I'm just going to turn this over to Kelley for some short thank yous and closing remarks, and then we will stay after to answer additional questions. Oh, Kelley, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel and Kelley, for really inspiring work and important work. And if for everyone here, if you have conservation projects, Human Nature Group is for hire. This is what they do. So contact them. I'm sure they'd be willing to, consult and provide some initial insight, but ultimately they have to make a living, and this is how they do it. So I do want to share my screen very briefly, um, and say just on behalf of our program partners, thank you all for being here today. These are the 21 program partners that we have. We are always seeking additional program partners, AZA accredited zoos and aquariums to join Sea Turtle Safe. But we are so grateful for all of the expertise and all that these folks are doing beyond their walls and within their walls to protect sea turtles. And we have an incredible suite of advisors we are so grateful for, and our field partners such as Team Beach. We are so grateful to have you doing the work you do and to be able to support you. And to all of you, thank you for being here. Happy holidays on behalf of Sea Turtle Safe. Please reach out to safeseaturtle@gmail.com if you have any questions. We also encourage you to go to our website, turtlesafe.org, to find out more information on the program and And yeah, I'm gonna just leave it there. And we'll stay on if feel free to stay on to listen to additional questions if you have time.
Thank you all so much. Kelly and Rachel, do you have just a few extra minutes? There's some really interesting questions here.
Yeah, they came rolling in like at the very end. When I was chatting, I didn't even realize there were, questions were stacking up. So
It's good. It's
mhm,
wonderful. And
love
so,
it.
what I'd love to start with is just what advice do you have for undergrad students or recent graduates interested in sea turtle behavior change? I found a few programs that tackle these issues. How can we get involved? Where can we start? Before you answer, I'm going to do a quick ad. If you want to reach out to your local zoo or aquarium who is doing sea turtle work or reach out to Sea Turtle Safe, we can get you connected with places that might have open opportunities. I know we have one, and opportunities for you at least to volunteer, to participate in some of that research, to get your feet wet.
Mhm.
And I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and Rachel.
Yeah, I guess if you're particularly if you're at a university that does this kind of work, like get in touch with those professors, get in touch with start building your network of people that you come across. If you come to webinars like this, everyone that we know of that does this work is really, really happy to chat about it and really happy to bring people into the fold. And so, for example, there's also the AZA social science research and evaluation advisory group that we work with, and there's all kinds of ways and all kinds of groups and networks to get involved in. Really, it's put your foot out there and get involved. There's not a lack of work, and we're always looking for new and bright ideas and people to join the network. So, Rachel, do you have any other specific ideas?
Just that if you're looking to sort of study this in school, there's a lot I've noticed. There's been a huge kind of influx in the amount of programs and different universities that are offering these types of degrees now in a way that I don't think existed even 10 years ago.
Yep.
Um, I'll just plug my program at the University of Florida. I was in the School of Natural Resources and Environment, which offers an interdisciplinary ecology PhD. And it's amazing because you have access to the entire course catalog. So you're not just taking courses in wildlife ecology and conservation. You can take them from any department, including the social science department. And there's all, communications, all sorts of other things that you have access to. And it allows you to create a project that is interdisciplinary in nature. And if so, especially if you're looking for opportunities to think about conservation and behavior change in the same space, I would encourage you to look for some of those new interdisciplinary degrees and programs that are popping up because I've seen a lot more of that lately.
I love that. An excellent point about those new programs popping up. And then I will ask a question that is also has a lot of upvotes and is also near and dear to my heart as somebody who works directly with volunteers. So how can an on the beach sea turtle program volunteer best help tourists to understand how critical behavior change is? Relative to topics like plastic pollution, light pollution, tourists typically approach volunteers while working on locating, protecting, and inventorying nests. Their volunteers are busy and have very little time to engage with onlookers.
Ooh, that's such a great question.
It's a big one.
It's challenging, right? Because at the risk of being a broken record, a lot of this has to do with audience, and so a lot of it is sort of a commitment by the volunteer organization or the conservation organization to maybe do a little bit of audience research in their local area and start to understand what some of the sort of key penetration methods might be. So you get a lot of these questions on the beach. Tourists are inherently transient. That makes things extra complicated. But we spend a lot of time talking about messaging that, for example, is at least value neutral or not necessarily in conflict with a lot of values that may be held by different people. And sort of when you're talking to tourists, it's a black box and you might not have a sense of where they're coming from initially. And the last thing you want to do is present information in a way that is in direct conflict with someone's value systems or someone's worldview. So we talk a lot about messaging in ways that are sort of appeal to very commonly held values and maybe avoid some of those messaging techniques that may be perceived as politically charged or any of those other things. We also talk about instead of just a fact-based message, which I think a lot of us have been uh, brought up to do over the past, several decades. And now we're learning there's sort of other ways to reach and communicate with folks. If you see they're with a family, that's probably important to them. You could sort of frame your message around needs for their children, future generations, rather than just sticking to that sea turtles are endangered. This is blah, 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 blah. So there's so many different ways to kind of tune in, take note of your surroundings, take note of what you can observe just with that person that's asked you the question and see if you can help to frame your messages accordingly in the moment. But I'll see if Kelley wants to say something.
Yeah, I'll just plug it's related, but we just finished working on a toolkit for effective choral communication. So the examples in this toolkit are choral related. However, it really lays out a roadmap of how to design messaging and communication for specific audiences. And we go through several different frames or domains of messages, just like Rachel pointed out. We talk about social norms. We talk about psychological distance, which is how far away the problem feels from a person. And we go through kind of each of these concepts and how to think about them and use them to target messaging for your audience. So that should literally be posted in maybe the next day or
I was gonna
two.
say maybe later today if we're on
Maybe
time.
today. We just finished it up and it's highly relevant to this group as well. And so it's a pretty extensive like 50-page document that really walks through tailoring message to intended audience. So we can share that. It'll be on the Safe Coral website.
And for anyone who wants to find all the safe programs, you can go to the Association of Zoos and Aquariums website, look for safe, and then you'll find, 55 plus safe programs, and you can get to all of them like that. So.
Amazing. We do have even more questions that have been coming in. We do have a couple of people who are interested in becoming a member of the Team Beach Network. Omar from Smile for Life Gambia would like more information. Is there a way that people can best reach out to you if they would like to get involved in some way?
Yes. So if you follow the link, which I believe is in the chat to the Team Beach website,
Mhm.
there right on our homepage, there's a big button that says join our Team Beach. I forget if it says join the listserv or join the network, join something. Click on that button. That'll add you to our Google group listserv, and that way you can be part of the discourse for anybody and all of us co-founders of Team Beach are, of course, on that listserv, but also anybody that's just interested in being part of a space in which we can discuss behavior change as it relates to sea turtle conservation. So that's where we'll put out the call for case studies every year for the symposium, and then any job announcements that might come up that are relevant to this. Or we're hoping to start getting more sharing going on that listserv, and really kind of develop the community of practice starting from that listserv. So please join that, and you'll be in the loop.
Yep, and I'm just adding our emails to the chat for those who are still here. It's just our first name at humannaturegroup.org. If you want to reach out, have any questions about Team Beach, any questions about Human Nature Group, we are happy to chat. This is what we like to chat about. So love to meet more people.
And if anyone didn't get their question answered, feel free to email that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up. It's
Okay.
1:10. Thank you all for being here today. Rachel and Kelley, thank you for the work you're doing. and for partnering with Sea Turtle Safe. And Cassandra, thanks for your help today. Happy holidays, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you the next Sea Turtle Safe webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.